Her family traded fat daughter to mountain man for supplies. He gave her a kingdom. Debts due today, Pemberton, Harold Hayes declared, shoving his stepdaughter into the spill of winter light. I've no coin, but I've got collateral. He turned Rosa so the whole store could see her, the red hair, the soft body that had carried every chore in the Hayes house, the green eyes still bright enough to hurt him. "Take the fat one," he jeered. Laughter broke against the pickle barrels and flour sacks like glass. Rosa didn't beg. She'd learned long ago that begging only taught cruel men new tricks. Her hands, scrub raw from wash tubs, were steady at her sides. Only her breath betrayed her. Short, white bursts in the cold aisle between kerosene and tack. Mr. Pemberton, who counted mercy in pennies and preferred nickels, tapped his ledger. "I don't buy people, Hayes." "You sell everything else," Harold snapped. "She works like an ox. You'll make your money back in a month." From the far corner of the general store, a man turned from the wall of traps and lamp wicks. He was taller than the doorframe would like, shoulders packed in a rough stag-hide coat. Wind had burned his cheekbones the color of brick. His eyes were a winter gray that measured distance and men with the same calm. Cedar Falls called him a dozen names, hermit, hunter, half-wild, but the one that stuck was simple: Matt Thornwood. Pemberton's mouth curved. "Thornwood, you came for supplies. I can sweeten the deal, double your winter goods if you take the girl off this ledger." Rosa felt the room tilt. The heat in her face turned to ice. She had survived a childhood of being weighed and found wanting. Now she was being priced. She lifted her chin anyway. If the mountain ate her, let it see her eyes. Matt looked at Harold first, and disgust showed clean as print. Then he looked at Rosa and found something the town had never bothered to see: a spine that hadn't snapped, a light that wouldn't smother, a dignity the world kept trying to repossess. When he spoke, his voice was low, even. "I won't own anyone." Harold rolled his eyes. "Call it whatever you like." Matt set his gloves on the counter, slow enough to be a warning. "If she comes, it's as a free woman. If she wants to leave, I'll see her safe." Pemberton was already reaching for the flour credits. Done. Done. The word clanged like a door. Rosa's world slid, then steadied around the stranger who had refused to let her be a commodity. Matt gathered his supplies, lifted the bundle as if it weighed nothing, and tipped his head toward the blued, brittle sky beyond the porch. "Come if you choose," he said, meeting her eyes, making the choice real. Behind her, Harold snorted. In front of her, the horizon opened like a road no one had dared offer. Rosa stepped toward the cold and the possibility. The bell above the door rang once, bright as a promise. "Tell me where you're listening from tonight. Cedar Falls is somewhere in 1888, but I want to know your corner of the world." The road out of Cedar Falls wore winter like chain mail, thin sun striking ice into a million hard scales. Wind combed through the cottonwoods and found every gap in Rosa's shawl. She kept pace beside Matt's long stride, the general store shrinking behind them until it was only a square of clapboard and spite. She didn't look back. People who looked back were counting losses. She'd spent too many years doing that. Rosa's body had always entered a room first, long before her voice. Broad shoulders from hauling water, thick forearms from wringing linens, hips that knocked into chair legs no matter how carefully she turned. Strangers decided she must be lazy. The truth lived under her fingernails and in the ache between her shoulder blades. Even her beauty came with caveats, as if the town had written a rule book about her face. Green eyes too bright, freckles too many, hair too red and unruly unless tamed into a punishing knot. She learned to move softly, to fold herself smaller, to apologize with her posture so her mouth could stay silent. Harold had trained the world to laugh on cue. Eat less, work more, he would say, and when she did both, he called her ungrateful. Margaret, her mother, had become a ghost in daylight, hands busy, eyes elsewhere, fear making her smaller than the kitchen where she lived. Rosa had tried for years to earn a tenderness that never showed up, the way some people wait for a letter that was never posted. You could starve for love without anyone noticing the ribs. Cedar Falls rewarded meanness with attention, a sheriff who kept the peace mostly for the men who could afford it, a pastor who preached about gluttony with his eyes on Rosa, and then ate 2 pieces of church pie, a seamstress who would not take Rosa's measurements in public and told her to come back after dark. Every corner sharpened on her softness, and every winter was an audit. How much coal, how much flour, how much patience left. Matt Thornwood did not belong to that arithmetic. He moved like a man who trusted his own quiet. The mountain had pared him down to usefulness. Heavy boots, risoled twice, stag-hide coat rubbed smooth at the elbows, a hat brim sweated darker where he grabbed it without thinking. He seemed built of factual things, rope, steel, pine resin, distances measured by the hour. Yet the first fact he offered her was not a tool, it was a promise. Come if you choose, leave if you want. In a town that loved a cage, freedom sounded almost indecent. At the edge of Main Street, he slowed. "There's a cut trail north of the mill," he said. "Less wind." Rosa nodded and kept her eyes on the ruts where wagon wheels had worried the frozen road. Words felt expensive. She spent none. They took the mill trail. Snow squeaked underfoot in that particular way of deep cold. After a while, he matched her shorter stride without making a show of it. When the wind hit hard around a bend, he shifted to the outside so it took him first. He didn't ask if she was tired. He didn't ask if she was hungry. He simply stopped at a cedar snag, unstrapped his pack, and handed her a heel of bread as if the plan had always included this mercy. "You walk this way often?" she asked, surprised to hear her voice steady. "Enough to know where the drifts bury the creek," he said. His words were spare and properly fitted, like pegs driven into seasoned wood. Why the mountain? The question escaped before she could pull it back. Why not people? Not a fair choice to make for a man, he said, and after a beat added, "The mountain's honest. People can be confused." He looked at her then, the winter gray of his eyes softening around the edges. "You've had your share of confusion." Rosa almost laughed. "Is that what they call it? Confusion?" "Sometimes cruelty dresses as clarity, easier to sell." They walked again. The town sounds, iron ringing on anvil, a dog's bark, the clatter of a dropped pail, thinned to the clean hush of snow and tree and breath. Rosa let the quiet settle her bones. She noticed, for the first time in months, that her shoulders could lower without permission. When they reached the river bridge, Cedar Falls pressed one last hand against them. 2 farm boys lounged on the rail, red-nosed and smirking. "Thornwood," one called, "knew you'd need extra rations to haul that much woman uphill." Rosa's face flushed with the old heat. Before shame could find her posture, Matt's head tilted, not toward the boys, but toward the span. "Bridge is iced," he said to her, as if the heckling were a woodpecker in a distant tree. "Walk the snowpack on the upstream side. More grip." He stepped aside to let her go first, not to show her off, but to show her he was not a shield she had to hide behind. She crossed with her breath slow and careful, the world narrowing to boards, traction, balance. At the far bank, she turned. Matt followed without looking at the boys at all. Disregard did what anger could not. It made mockery feel small. The farm boys' laughter fell flat and stayed there. They climbed until the town became an idea and then a rumor. Pines shouldered over them, wind threading the needles with a sound like distant surf. When Rosa's boot slipped on a pitchy root, Matt's hand was simply there, a physics problem solved. Weight, counterweight, a brief anchoring. He didn't comment. The dignity of silence impressed itself on the moment like a seal in wax. At a creek no wider than a doorway, he halted. "We stop here," he said. "You'll want heat slow, not all at once." He built a small fire with the ease of repetition, coaxing flame from birch bark and breath. The first wash of warmth reached her face and came away with cold like taking off a wet cloak. He poured coffee into a tin cup, black and honest. "Why didn't you bargain?" she asked finally, eyes on the fire. "With Pemberton. You could have asked for triple supply. He'd have paid it." Matt rested his forearms on his knees. "Because you're not a thing you add to a ledger without moving the decimal place in your own soul." He said it matter-of-factly, like weather. Rosa held the cup in both hands and watched steam twist upward. Her throat tightened around an answer that would not come. Gratitude had always been a currency she paid in work. Words felt slippery and insufficient. She tried anyway. "Thank you." He nodded once. "All right." It startled her, the way all right could receive thanks without diminishing it. No sermon, no "you owe me," no magnanimous flourish, just an acceptance that dignity had been returned to its owner. By mid-afternoon, cloud rag edged the peaks. Matt glanced at the sky, measuring. "Another hour to my place if the trail holds. We push." Rosa rose, heavier with bread, lighter with something else. Choice. Not the counterfeit kind Cedar Falls offered, the kind with 2 bad doors, but the kind with a horizon behind it. She fell into step, and the trail bent toward a stand of old firs that kept the wind at shoulder height. The cabin appeared the way good shelter should, suddenly, exactly when the body most needs it. A stout rectangle of hand-hewn logs, stone chimneys squared true, smoke rising thin and blue. A pair of snowshoes leaned by the door. A stack of split wood sat under a lean-to, ends waxed against the weather. Everything about the place said the builder respected both storm and season. Matt lifted the latch and stood aside. "Home," he said to the room more than to her, as if the structure and he were in conversation. Heat drifted out, real heat, not just the idea of it. The interior smelled of spruce shavings and iron and something faintly sweet. Dried apples, maybe. A second door stood open to a small room where a bed waited, quilts folded square as if for inspection. Rosa did not move for a breath. She had learned all her life to slip into spaces without leaving a mark. Now a room was waiting specifically for the shape she made. She stepped inside, and the floor did not creak in complaint. Her shoulders dropped another inch. "Food in the pantry," Matt said, setting his pack down. "You eat before you help. House rule." "Whose house?" she asked, half a smile tugging without permission. "Ours while you need it." The word hung between them, gentle and shocking. Ours. It did not claim her, it included her. Rosa set her palm to the table's worn plank, felt the ghosts of knives and plates and winter evening sanded into the grain. She could not change Cedar Falls in a day. She could not rewrite Harold's ledger or Margaret's fear. But she could decide right now to be a person in a room where her breath was not an apology. "Then I'll follow the rules," she said, "for now." Matt's mouth twitched in what might become a smile. He took down 2 bowls. "For now is a good start." Morning came soft, wrapped in mist and the smell of spruce. The world outside the cabin glowed silver, frost clinging to every pine needle like crystal dust. Rosa woke to the steady crackle of a fire already burning in the hearth and the faint sound of someone splitting wood outside. For a moment she didn't remember where she was. The bed was too soft, the air too clean, the silence too merciful. Then it came back. The store, the trade, the man with winter-gray eyes who had not looked at her like a burden. When she stepped out of the small room, Matt was already at the stove, pouring coffee into a tin mug. "Mornin'," he said without turning, as though he had expected her to appear at that exact second. "Morning," she replied, her voice still rough from sleep. "There's bread on the table. Eat before we ride." "Ride?" He nodded toward the window. "Cabin here is just winter quarters. I've got another up the ridge, better light, closer to the traps. We'll need to reach it before snow buries the trail." Rosa's stomach tightened. "It's far?" 2 hours if the horse minds his manners." She hesitated. The world beyond that door meant exposure again. To cold, to memory, to the fear that she did not belong anywhere. But then she looked at him, at the way he checked his rifle, at the quiet assurance in every movement, and something in her chest settled. "All right," she said simply. They saddled the horse together. Matt worked in practiced silence, tightening straps, checking hooves. Rosa tried to help, fumbling with the leather girth until her fingers went numb. Without a word, Matt reached over, his hand briefly covering hers, guiding the buckle through the loop. "There," he said, "you'll learn. I don't think I'm much good at mountain work." "You'll surprise yourself." The words landed deep. No one had ever told her that before. The trail climbed sharply as they left the valley. Pines closed in on both sides, the snow thickening with every yard. Rosa held on to the saddle horn, feeling the horse's steady rhythm beneath her. The air was sharp enough to sting her lungs, but she welcomed it. The sting meant she was alive, and not in Harold Hayes's kitchen, waiting to be scolded for existing. After a while, Matt said quietly, "If you're cold, there's an extra blanket behind you. I'm fine. You don't have to be fine. That's a rule up here." She almost laughed, the sound turning into a puff of white breath. "Then I'm cold." He reached back without turning, handed her the blanket, and she tucked it around her legs. The gesture was simple, but it felt like something sacred. They rode in silence for another hour. Rosa's mind wandered to the town she had left behind, to the faces that had watched her leave without a flicker of regret. She wondered if they would even notice she was gone. Probably not. The thought should have hurt, but instead it brought a strange peace. Matt's voice broke the quiet. "You've got courage." She blinked. "Courage?" Not many would step into the unknown just because someone said they could. Rosa looked at the back of his broad shoulders, at the way he sat tall in the saddle. I didn't have much of a choice. He turned his head slightly, enough for her to see the edge of his profile. Everyone has a choice. Yours just came late. They reached a narrow ridge where the wind cut sharp as a knife. The horse's hooves sank deep into the snow, and Rosa's heart raced every time they slipped a little. Matt dismounted, took the reins, and led the animal through the worst of it. When the path widened again, he turned to help her down. She hesitated, embarrassed at the thought of how heavy she must be. "I can manage," she murmured. "Not asking permission," he said gently. His hands were sure as they circled her waist, lowering her to the ground as if she weighed nothing at all. For the first time in her life, she believed that maybe she didn't. They walked the next stretch on foot, leading the horse. The snow crunched under their boots. The trees stood heavy with white silence. Somewhere far off, a hawk cried. Rosa tilted her head up. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Matt nodded. "Most people think the mountain's cruel, but cruelty's just what it looks like when you don't understand strength." She looked at him, wondering if he meant the mountain or her. By midday, they reached a frozen clearing that opened to a view of the valley below. The sky was the color of pale pewter, the kind that promises snow before nightfall. Matt stopped, gesturing toward a cluster of dark pines on the slope ahead. "There," he said, "home." The second cabin was larger than the first, log walls thick and well sealed, smoke curling gently from the chimney. A small shed stood beside it, and beyond that, a pen where a pair of goats shuffled through the snow. "It's beautiful," Rosa breathed. "It's practical," Matt said, though a flicker of pride crossed his face. "Come inside. Fire's still alive." Inside, warmth and wood smoke wrapped around them. Rosa stood just inside the door, watching Matt move, hanging his coat, shaking snow from his boots, checking the firebox. He moved like a man who had learned to speak through his hands instead of words. He handed her a mug of hot cider. "Drink. The mountain punishes hunger." She obeyed. The heat hit her stomach and spread outward, loosening muscles she hadn't known were tight. "You live here alone?" she asked softly. "Used to. Now maybe not." Her heart stumbled at the implication, but she said nothing. That evening, as the wind rose outside, Matt showed her where to find supplies, where the wood pile was stacked, how to latch the shutters against storms. He spoke little, but every instruction carried the same unspoken truth. This was her home now, too, if she wanted it. When they sat down to supper, a simple stew, thick and fragrant, Rosa found herself smiling without realizing it. The fire painted her cheeks gold. The smell of pine filled the air. She caught Matt watching her, not with pity, not with ownership, but with quiet respect. "What?" she asked, self-conscious. "Just wondering what you're thinking." "That I don't deserve this." He leaned forward slightly. "You deserve better than this, but it's a start." For a long time after he spoke, neither of them moved. The wind howled against the walls, and yet somehow the cabin felt untouchable, like a world they had built out of defiance and breath. That night, Rosa lay in her bed, listening to the wind and the faint rhythm of Matt moving about in the next room. The fire's glow flickered under her door. For the first time since childhood, she felt something strange and terrifying. Hope. And in that fragile quiet, she made herself a promise that she would never again let anyone decide her worth. The mountain taught her its language slowly, in wood smoke, in wind, In the hush that followed every snowfall, days unfolded like the rhythm of a song Rosa hadn't known she already carried inside her. Morning light filtered through the small window panes, soft and golden, painting the cabin walls with warmth that no town hearth had ever managed. At first, she woke before Matt did, out of old habit. In Harold's house, the day began with orders barked and ended with exhaustion. Here there was no shouting, only the soft crackle of fire and the occasional creak of timber settling. The first few mornings, she sat on the edge of her bed, unsure if she was allowed to move. Then she began to explore the boundaries of her new world, where the flour was kept, how the water boiled fastest on the back of the stove, how the light hit the floorboards just right for drying herbs. When Matt came in from chopping wood that first week, he found her kneeling by the hearth, baking bread. "Didn't have to," he said simply. "I know," she answered, "but I wanted to." He nodded once, as if that was reason enough. They ate in near silence that morning, though it wasn't the heavy kind of silence she had known before. This one felt alive, filled with the sound of spoons against bowls and the occasional breath that meant contentment. Later, Matt began showing her the work of the cabin, not as orders, but as lessons. How to split logs so the grain didn't fight the blade. How to lay kindling for a fire that would burn slow through the night. How to patch a torn coat with sinew strong enough to outlast the storm. "Everything here earns its keep," he told her one afternoon as they stacked firewood together. "That doesn't mean we're its masters, just part of the exchange." Rosa nodded, brushing snow from her gloves. "So if I'm here, I have to earn my keep too?" Matt's mouth curved, just barely. "You already have." The words stunned her more than a shout ever could. In the evenings, when work was done, they sat by the fire, he carving a handle for a new axe, she mending a quilt. Sometimes he'd tell her about the mountain, which trails flooded first, which berries turned poisonous after frost, where the elk wintered. Other nights, they simply let the fire do the talking. One night, while wind howled against the shutters, Rosa looked up from her stitching. "Don't you ever get lonely here?" Matt paused, knife hovering above the wood. "I used to." "And now?" He set the knife down, meeting her eyes. "Now I don't." Something in her chest tightened, not sadness exactly, but recognition, that feeling of being seen after years of invisibility. The next morning brought a storm. Snow came thick and fast, smothering the forest in silence. Matt stayed close to the cabin, mending traps and checking the roof. Rosa made stew and kept the fire fed. By evening, the world outside had vanished beneath white, and the only light left came from the flames that danced across the walls. "Storm'll last 3 days," Matt said, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. "Best to stay warm and let it do its worst." He handed her a mug, their fingers brushing. Neither spoke about it, but both felt the spark that wasn't from the fire. They sat close that night, shoulders nearly touching, listening to the wind moan against the chimney. Rosa said quietly, "I used to think silence meant punishment." "And now?" he asked. "Now it sounds like peace." Matt looked at her for a long moment. "Then keep it," he said. "Peace is the rarest thing you'll ever own." The next day she insisted on helping with the animals. The snow was knee-deep, the air sharp as glass, but she followed Matt to the goat pen anyway. Her breath came out in thick white clouds, and the hem of her skirt was soon soaked through. Matt watched her wrestle a stubborn latch and finally stepped in. "Let me—" "I've got it," she said, determined. The latch gave way, and she nearly fell backward, laughing as she caught herself on the rail. Matt chuckled, a sound so rare she almost didn't recognize it. "Stubborn," he murmured. "Maybe," she said, smiling, "but I learned from the best." That laughter, brief and unexpected, warmed the air more than the fire waiting inside. When evening came, Rosa cooked venison stew while Matt played with a small whittled horse he'd carved. He slid it across the table toward her. "For you," he said almost shyly. She traced the smooth wood with her thumb. "It's beautiful. You made this?" "Hands get restless," he said. "Better they build than break." She looked up at him, the firelight softening his hard features. "You're not what they say about you in town." "Neither are you." Their eyes met, steady, unguarded, and in that moment the cabin felt too small to hold everything unspoken between them. That night, Rosa dreamed of a world where she was not too much, not too heavy, not too loud, not too anything, just enough. The days that followed settled into rhythm. Rosa tended to the house, adding small touches, a sprig of pine in a jar, new curtains from old fabric, warmth in every corner. Matt taught her to track deer prints in snow, to tell direction by moss, to listen for avalanches in the silence before the trees sighed. "You see the world different when you're quiet," he said. Rosa smiled. "I spent my life being quiet, but I think I'm only just learning how to listen." At night, they spoke about little things, the weather, the stars, the scent of rain when the wind shifted south. Slowly, laughter became a habit. One evening, she burned the stew. The smell filled the cabin, sharp and bitter. Rosa's face flushed red. "I'm sorry," but Matt only smiled. "Means the bottom's well seasoned now." She blinked, then burst out laughing, and for the first time she didn't cover her mouth to hide it. By the second month, the cabin no longer felt like his home with her inside it. It felt like their home. Matt had built the walls, but Rosa filled them with life, the hum of her voice, the rustle of her skirts, the scent of bread baking. Once, as they sat by the fire, Rosa looked around the room. The shelves neatly lined, the window trimmed with pine cones she had polished, the soft glow of lamplight bathing the wooden walls. "You built this place," she said softly, "but I think you built it for two." Matt's gaze lingered on her face. "Maybe I just didn't know it until now." Outside, the storm had stopped. Moonlight touched the snow until it gleamed like silver glass. Rosa stood and went to the door, opening it slightly. Cold air slipped in, crisp and clean. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Matt came up behind her, his voice low. "So are you." She turned, startled, but he wasn't smiling. He said it like a truth that had been waiting too long to be spoken. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then he reached out, brushing a stray strand of red hair from her cheek. His hand lingered there, rough from work, but gentle. "You should sleep," he said finally. Rosa nodded, though her pulse was loud in her ears. "Good night, Matt." "Good night, Rosa." When she lay down that night, sleep didn't come easily. She kept seeing the look in his eyes, not pity, not curiosity, but warmth, something deeper, something dangerous. And though she didn't yet know what would come next, she knew this. She was no longer a traded daughter or a burden to be hidden. She was part of a story that had only just begun. Spring crept down the mountain in whispers, snow melting in rivulets, the creek loosening its frozen grip, birds returning like forgotten songs. Rosa stood one morning by the window, watching sunlight scatter over the thawing lake. It felt strange, that much brightness. The world outside the glass looked ready to bloom, but part of her still carried the shadow of Cedar Falls. Matt had gone to check his traps near the ridge. He'd left before dawn, his rifle slung over one shoulder, his voice low. Back before dark. Keep the fire going. She had nodded, but all morning an unease grew under her ribs, a feeling she couldn't name. She tried to distract herself, sweeping the cabin, kneading bread, feeding the goats. But every time the wind shifted, she imagined the crunch of boots that weren't his. When the door finally swung open near sunset, she nearly dropped the kettle in relief. He stepped inside, snow still clinging to his coat. "You okay?" he asked, reading her face in a single glance. "I just—" She hesitated. "You were gone longer than usual." "Trail gave me trouble," he said simply, setting his gear down, but something in his eyes was heavier than usual. "What happened?" Matt didn't answer right away. He poured himself coffee, sat by the table, and stared into it as if the dark liquid might offer an answer. Finally, he said, "I ran into a man from town, sheriff's cousin. Said there's talk in Cedar Falls." Rosa's hands tightened around her apron. "About what? About you? About me?" Her breath caught. "What are they saying?" "That I took you against your will, that you were sold like livestock." His jaw tensed. "They're calling it kidnapping." Rosa's stomach dropped. "That's not true. You saved me." "I know," he said, voice low and controlled. "But men like Harold and Pemberton don't care about truth. They care about control. Losing you means losing face." Rosa sank into a chair. The thought of Harold's sneer and her mother's cold silence twisted inside her. What will they do? "Maybe nothing," Matt said. "Maybe send someone up here to cause trouble." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "If that happens, Rosa, I need you to stay calm. Promise me that." "I promise." For a while, the only sound was the fire snapping. Rosa reached across the table and touched his hand. "They can't take me back. I won't go." Matt's eyes lifted to hers, storm gray and steady. "They won't? Not while I'm breathing?" But his tone carried something else beneath the steel. Fear. Not for himself, but for her. The next few days passed in uneasy quiet. Matt doubled the firewood, checked the rifle more often, and spent long hours outside scanning the valley. Rosa tried to act normal, cooking, mending, humming to herself, but tension hung between them like unspoken weather. One afternoon, while sorting supplies in the storage room, Rosa found something that stopped her cold. A small wooden box tucked beneath a folded blanket. Inside lay a locket, tarnished silver, etched with initials C.T. She opened it carefully. Inside were two tiny portraits, a woman with dark hair and kind eyes, and a little girl smiling shyly beside her. She realized, with a slow ache, that she was looking at his past. When Matt came in, she turned the locket in her palm. "She was your wife," Rosa said softly, "and your daughter." He froze, then nodded once. "Catherine and Lily?" "I'm sorry," Rosa whispered. "I didn't mean to." "It's all right." He sat down heavily, staring at the fire. "They've been gone 8 years. Fire took the cabin. I got out." His voice roughened. "I built this place after that. Figured if I kept to myself, I couldn't lose anyone else." Rosa hesitated. "And now?" Matt's eyes met hers. Tired, honest. "Now, I don't know what I'm more afraid of. Being alone again or not being alone anymore." She stepped closer, her voice shaking. "You saved me, Matt. You gave me a home when no one else would. I'm not Catherine. I'm not here to replace her. But maybe I can help you stop being afraid." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he reached out, his hand covering hers. Rough, warm, real. "You already have." But peace never lasts long on the frontier. 3 days later, the sound of hooves broke the quiet. Matt looked up from the woodpile, eyes narrowing. "Stay inside," he said. Rosa peeked through the curtain. 3 riders approached, Harold in the lead, Pemberton beside him, and a man in a sheriff's badge trailing behind. The sight of them made her throat close. Harold dismounted first. "Thornwood!" he shouted. "You've got something that belongs to me." Matt stepped onto the porch, rifle slung across his chest, but not raised. "You mean the woman you traded for sugar and salt? She doesn't belong to you or anyone else." The sheriff spoke next, cautious but firm. "There's talk she was taken by force." "Then you heard wrong." Rosa couldn't stay hidden. She pushed open the door and stepped beside Matt, her heart hammering. "I went with him willingly," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "He never hurt me. My family sold me like a sack of grain. I'm not going back." Harold sneered. "You think anyone believes a fat girl's fairy tale? Look at you. You belong in a kitchen, not playing Queen of the Mountains." Before Matt could move, Rosa stepped forward. "Maybe so," she said, her voice rising, "but at least here I'm treated like a human being. You never gave me that much." The sheriff's expression shifted, respect, maybe shame. "Mr. Hayes," he said quietly, "sounds to me like she's made her choice." Pemberton scowled. "Choice? She's property until the debt's settled." Matt's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. "Debt's settled. I paid it the day I took her. You try to change that and you'll answer to me." Silence hung thick as smoke. Harold spat into the snow, glared at Rosa one last time, and climbed back onto his horse. "You'll regret this," he hissed. When the riders finally disappeared down the trail, Rosa's knees gave out. Matt caught her before she fell, holding her tight. "It's over," he said quietly. "Is it?" she whispered. He didn't answer. He just held her closer, as if he could keep the whole world from touching her again. That night, the wind rose. Rosa sat by the fire, her hands trembling around a mug of tea. Matt knelt beside the window, eyes fixed on the dark line of trees below. "They'll spread word in town," he said. "Could be others come looking." Rosa swallowed hard. "Then what do we do?" He turned toward her, expression fierce but tender. "We live. We don't hide. We build something worth defending." She looked into his eyes and saw no hesitation there, only conviction and love too deep to name. For the first time, Rosa wasn't afraid of the fight ahead. She was ready to stand beside him, not behind, not beneath, but beside. And somewhere outside, the mountain wind carried their vow across the valley, that no amount of cruelty, rumor, or winter could take from them what they had already claimed: freedom, dignity, and the kind of love that could outlast storms. The mountain stayed quiet for a few uneasy days, the way the sky holds its breath before a storm. Matt's instincts were sharp, honed by years of solitude, and he knew when danger hadn't yet left. Rosa could see it, too, in the way his shoulders stayed tense even while he chopped wood, in how he paused to listen every time the wind changed direction. Then, one gray morning, the dogs started barking, deep angry barks that carried through the valley. Matt was already at the window before Rosa had set down her spoon. "Stay back," he said. Through the glass they saw them, 6 riders this time, not 3. Harold at the front again, his face pinched with triumph, and behind him 2 men holding rifles, strangers from town. Matt opened the cabin door and stepped onto the porch, calm as the land itself. Rosa followed but stayed inside the frame of the doorway, heart hammering. "Thornwood!" Harold's voice cracked in the cold air. "The sheriff's not with us today, which means this can go however we want it to." Matt didn't raise his gun. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to make even the wind hesitate. "You're trespassing?" Harold laughed, brittle and ugly. "So what? You think this little cabin gives you power? You think she's your prize now?" He pointed toward Rosa. "That fat sow belongs to her family, and her family says she's coming home." Rosa stepped forward then, her voice clear. "Home? You mean the place where you called me a curse? Where you traded me for salt and coffee?" Her voice broke, but only for a heartbeat. "No, Harold, this is my home." One of the armed men spat into the snow. "Talk's cheap. Let's just take her." Matt moved faster than they expected, rifle raised, barrel gleaming in the pale light. "Take one more step and you won't take another," he said. The men froze. There was no tremor in his hand, no bluff in his tone. The silence stretched tight. The only sound, the crackle of the fire behind Rosa. Harold smirked. "You won't shoot us all." "Maybe not," Matt said evenly, "but you'll be first." Rosa's breath caught. For a moment, time itself seemed to hold still. Then, behind Harold, one of his sons shifted nervously. "Pa, maybe we should—" "Shut up," Harold barked, but his voice wavered. Matt took a slow step forward, the snow crunching under his boots. "You think cruelty makes you strong, Harold. You don't know strength. Strength is watching someone you love suffer and still finding kindness left in you. Strength is choosing peace when the world teaches you nothing but violence." Rosa's eyes filled with tears. Harold's sneer faltered. "You think you're better than me?" "I don't have to be better," Matt said. "Just done." He lowered the rifle, not as surrender, but as verdict. "Leave this mountain. Don't come back." For a heartbeat, Harold's face twisted with rage. Then, without warning, he lunged, hand reaching for the pistol at his hip. The shot cracked like thunder. Snow leapt into the air. Birds burst from the pines. Rosa gasped, clutching the doorframe. When the sound faded, Harold stood frozen, staring at the snow by his boot, a clean hole smoking there, inches from his foot. Matt hadn't missed. He never did. "Next one," Matt said quietly. "Won't be a warning." For a long second, no one moved. Then Harold swallowed hard, rage melting into fear. "Come on," he muttered, backing toward his horse. His men followed, their bravado dissolving with every backward step. Rosa watched them ride off, the echo of hooves fading into the trees. Her knees trembled with relief. Matt set the rifle aside and turned to her. "You all right?" She nodded, though her eyes still shone. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." He stepped closer, brushing snow from her hair. "No one threatens what's mine." Rosa looked up sharply, but his gaze softened. "I mean my home," he said. Then, quieter, "and the people I love." Her throat tightened. "Then it's our home," she whispered. He smiled, small, weary, real. "Yes, ours." Outside, the snow fell again, covering the last of the footprints that led away from the cabin. The mountain had seen violence before, but not this kind. not the kind born from love instead of hate. Inside, the fire burned brighter, as if it knew peace had been reclaimed. Rosa leaned against Matt's chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her ear. The only sound she needed to trust that everything they had fought for was safe. Spring deepened, and the mountain shed its white armor. Streams ran quick again, trees shivered with new leaves, and the earth smelled of thaw and promise. The danger had passed, yet Rosa and Matt both knew that peace on the frontier was never permanent. It had to be earned each morning, like bread, like breath. They rebuilt what the fight had shaken. Matt repaired the barn door Harold's men had cracked. Rosa planted the first seeds of her own garden near the cabin, potatoes, carrots, wildflowers for color. "A queen needs her court," she teased when Matt asked why she was smiling at the dirt. He only grinned and handed her the spade. "Then let's build your kingdom right." Their days filled with quiet work, mending fences, hauling water, feeding goats, and laughing more often than either expected. The shadows of the past were still there, but lighter now, like smoke after rain. Sometimes, when dusk fell soft across the valley, Rosa would sit on the porch and watch the light fade from gold to violet. Matt would join her, 2 mugs of cider in hand. They didn't always speak. They didn't need to. One evening, she said quietly, "Do you ever wonder what the world thinks of us now?" Matt glanced at her, eyes thoughtful beneath the brim of his hat. "Let them think what they want. The world always needs its stories. We just chose to write ours instead of live in theirs." Rosa smiled. "Ours." She tasted the word like honey. He reached for her hand. "You gave me something I didn't think I'd ever have again." "What's that?" "Home." Her heart tightened. "And you gave me something I never had at all. A place where I belong." The wind sighed through the pines, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers. Down by the lake, the water rippled with the soft light of early stars. Matt drew her close, his arm around her shoulders, and she rested her head against him, listening to the slow, certain beat of his heart. "I used to think I was traded for nothing," Rosa whispered, "but I see it now. They didn't trade me away. They traded away the best part of their world." Matt smiled faintly. "And I traded loneliness for you. Fair deal." They sat together until the stars came out, bright and countless. Somewhere below, Cedar Falls went on with its noise and gossip, but up here the world was clean and wide and forgiving. The fire inside flickered, casting warm light through the cabin windows. It glowed against the dark like a lantern held out for anyone still lost in the cold. Proof that kindness could build more than walls. It could build kingdoms. Rosa looked toward the sky, her hand still in Matt's, and thought, "This is what forever feels like." The mountain wind moved softly through the trees, carrying their laughter and promise into the night. And that's where we leave them, a man, a woman, and a mountain that finally let them stay. Rosa wasn't sold that winter. She was set free. Matt didn't build her a castle of stone. He gave her something better, a kingdom made of trust, of laughter, of mornings that belonged only to them. Maybe that's all love really is. 2 wounded souls choosing to build peace where the world expected ruin. If this story found you tonight, tell me, where are you listening from? And if you still believe love can heal the broken, don't go anywhere. The next story is already waiting for you.